Happy Rom-Com Month, everybody. We're doing 28 Days of Love, and today is day 17. I'm your host, Melissa Forziat. I'm a keynote speaker. When I speak, my topic is something I call Take the Doughnut. It's another way to say Carpe Diem. And that comes from a strange thing that happened to me in college where I left a real donut on a table, and it became an object lesson for me in what it looks like to leave an opportunity behind. So now I want to take the donut. The reason I'm saying this is that from time to time, I'll issue myself a take the donut challenge. If there's something I want to do or go after, I'll make it official. I'll make some videos about it, and it's a way to hold myself accountable. But this time, I'm opening the challenge up to anybody who wants to join. So we're doing 28 Days of Love, 28 Days of Rom-Coms. Today is day 17. We're going to talk about the movie No Reservations. And I'm going to share 10 things I love about this movie, but I'm not doing this alone. First of all, I'm very excited to have a guest with me today, Scott Hicks, who is the director for No Reservations. Welcome, Scott.
Hi, Melissa. How are you?
I'm so good. So happy to be talking with you about this movie. I'd love to know a little, like, before we get into what we love about the movie, tell me a little bit about your journey with this film.
Well, this came to me as an offer at a time that I'd been actually directing a lot of commercials, and so I found something really sort of enticing about it, and especially the casting of Catherine Zeta-Jones. And as I understand it, she had sort of asked whether I would be interested in making the movie. So we met and talked about it and really sort of connected. And I thought, let's take this journey. It was an interesting idea. It was a remake of a German film that was more of an art house piece, if you like. And Catherine was just very eager, I think, to be the tentpole of a major movie in release. And so this was an interesting exercise for both of us.
Oh, that's so interesting to hear. So I am really looking forward to having this conversation. And for everybody watching, I also had a chance to speak with one of the culinary consultants on the film, Wong. So Scott and I are going to have our conversation about our favorite things from this movie, and we're also going to hear after that a little bit about Leanne's experience, a little bit about what the role of culinary consultant is, because it's a role that's unique to a film like this, about this subject matter. So we're going to get to hear a lot about No Reservations today. The format is we're going to do a top 10 list, our favorite things about this movie. I'm going to get the even numbers. Scott will get the odd numbers. And just to sort of recap, set the stage for this, we're talking about No Reservations that came out in 2007, directed by the one and only Scott Hicks, and written by Carol Fuchs and Sandra Nettlebeck. And of course, starring Catherine Zeta-Jones as Kate, Aaron Eckhart as Nick, Abigail Breslin as Zoe, Patricia Clarkson as Paula. The list goes on, really. I mean, so many incredible actors in this film. But let's talk about the things that we love about this movie. So I'm going to start off with number 10 here. And this is, I think, one of the reasons why this movie is so rewatchable for me. It's like this beautiful, peaceful fantasy kitchen. There are stressful things that happen. But for me, a lot of the films and TV shows that center around kitchens are stressful, and they're meant to show you like the anxiety of being in a kitchen. And I have worked in a kitchen and I felt like that. And something that I love about this movie is that it's very cinematic, and it feels like it gives you a little space to breathe. And so it makes everything shine in a way that it doesn't usually for me in films and TV about movies. So, like, you get gorgeous shots of food. You get to really see these scenes and these relationships building with all of these different characters. And it almost has like a meditative quality to it. And I think part of that also stems from how we hear Catherine talking or Kate talking for the whole movie. Like she almost has like an ASMR quality to her voice. And so it becomes like a peaceful film for me to watch. And not a lot of films based around the restaurant industry have that for me. So it makes it more rewatchable for me.
Okay, well, that's I think that yeah, I mean the kitchen was obviously a large set that was built. in order to accommodate the dynamics of the camera and the movement. And, you know, kitchens, restaurant kitchens are just such frenetic places. And Catherine was actually extremely helpful in this because she, as a dancer, had a tremendous sense of choreography. And we would do these rehearsals where, you know, the camera's moving through the kitchen. There are servers with food and plates, and people and the cooks cooking on the, you know, on the line, and we would do a rehearsal, and suddenly Catherine would go, "Stop!" and everyone would stop, and she said, "You should be there, and you should be here." And her the way she had the choreography in her head from how I had directed the scene was just phenomenal and just extremely helpful to me as a director. So yes, that was part of the reason for, you know, the spaciousness of the kitchen, was to allow for this kind of choreography between camera and actors, um, and some of the people in that kitchen too were actual cooks. There were people in the line who really were cooks, but they could, you know, they would, you know, when I auditioned them, they were able to sort of hold their intention as an actor, and so it felt like a place, you know, a dynamic sort of environment, if you like.
Yeah, and it reads beautifully on camera. Well, okay, so that was my number 10. What did you want to bring in for number 9?
I look, there's a few. Revisiting the film after so long, really, I was, you know, there were one or two moments where, um, you know, I was caught, you know, in the memory of doing it. But um, uh, the introduction of the character of Nick, Aaron Eckhart's character, who comes into the restaurant as a sort of replacement or stand-in for Kate, as she is going through some difficulties trying to, you know, bond with her niece, who's now she's a guardian of. Um, and this exuberant, sort of Italian influenced American sous chef, you know, is singing along to Pavarotti while he's preparing the quail. And I just loved the exuberance of it, which is so antithetical to Kate, who's terribly sort of buttoned up and restrained in her sort of manner. Um, so there was that, and it leads into this extraordinary sort of um, fight between Kate and the owner of the restaurant, Patricia Clarkson, as they walk through the restaurant, hammer and tongs at each other. And I was able to do all of this in one sort of seamless move through the restaurant with all the activity that was happening. And this is only something you can do with very good actors. You know, they just were fantastic. They end up in a wine locker, the door's shut, we can't hear what they're saying, but they're at each other like a cage fight, you know. And they sort of come out and so on. But it's so really it's a sort of extended scene where we meet Nick and we hear Kate's reaction to feeling she's being replaced by someone in her own kitchen.
I am so glad this was on your list. I really wanted to talk with you about this. First of all, the sound design and you got the right levels in that conversation with Patricia Clarkson's character, because it's like exactly, we can just barely hear what they're saying and we know the news isn't good. But
Right.
the camera work in this
Was
whole
good, wasn't it?
sequence
Yeah, yeah.
was so interesting. I think, rom-coms are not always known for being interesting in terms of how they're made. And I think a lot of the ones on my list are. And because that's something that I appreciate. And the camera work when we first meet Nick in the kitchen is just as sort of celebratory of this character as everything about the script itself. We're getting these really sweeping motions. And I think this is probably why you needed to have space in the kitchen. You get these really sweeping motions. At a point where he holds up the quail, we're shooting up at him and kind of going around. There's something very circular about the patterns. It's like a dance. And even this is a different scene, but even moments like when Kate is in therapy and she's talking about fish sticks, there's like a slow rotation happening with the camera. It's not just on her
Right,
face. There's interesting movement happening. And if you're not looking for it, you might not notice it, but you feel it. There's something
right, right.
artistically done about this.
Well, there's always, you know, to me, the movement of the camera has to connect with and reflect the internal life of the characters in front of the camera. And one of the challenges too with that particular scene, going the segue from the kitchen and Nick doing his Pavarotti imitation, but with a quail in his hand, is ludicrous and hopefully funny, and he's a charming character. But this was an integration of the set with a seamless integration into the location where we had the restaurant in Bleecker Street in the village. And so I was just really pleased that really worked. I would challenge anyone not to believe that kitchen was there and that they just came straight out of the kitchen into the restaurant and back and forth, and then back into the kitchen again. So the seamlessness of that was very important to me. But the camera movement that you point out, to me, has to always connect with the inner life of the characters in front of the lens, not just movement for its own sake, but something which subliminally, hopefully, the audience doesn't sort of go, here comes one of those camera moves, but it just takes the audience with the characters. That's certainly my intention. And
Yeah.
Stuart Dryden, who was the director of photography, was very responsive to my desire to do these sorts of moves in relation to the characters.
It's a different kind of feast for the eyes. There are many different kinds of that in this movie. So yeah, it's so beautiful. But yeah, okay, so that was your number nine. Let's talk about number eight. And this is a more a deeper look at a character relationship that gets started. So Nick and Zoe. One of the first real times they're interacting with each other is the way that Nick gets Zoe to eat the spaghetti. Everything about this. He, especially because we can compare this to Kate's complete, she has no idea how to talk to Zoe. She's trying. She really is. Zoe knows that, but Kate does not know how to talk to children, and including to this child. But Nick gets it, and Zoe's smart, and Zoe's mature for her age, and she's dealt with a lot. And Nick has this really interesting way of not talking down to her, but also talking to her like a child. Like there's like a respect for each other. They find just such an interesting balance. And this whole bit about where he gets her to eat the spaghetti, he just makes it for himself. He takes a bite. He says, "Hold this," and then she's just sitting there, starving, looking at this huge bowl of spaghetti. um, and then, she kind of knows this is meant for me. And she starts eating it. She's scarfing it down. And then he tells her this story about proms in ancient Rome just to keep her distracted. She's like, there are no proms in ancient Rome. And the whole relationship is just, it's like these characters have known each other forever. But really, this is the first time that they're interacting
Yeah.
with each other, and it feels like they're just exactly the right fit for each other. She needs him at this point in her life. This child needs a Nick in her life right now, and he is ready to be that for her. So, what a beautiful intro. And a lot of it was shot looking through I don't know what you call them, the not trays, but we're looking
Serving
through the shelving
serving
system.
area of where the plates are put up to be taken into the restaurant and so on. Yeah, yeah. I wanted to maintain the sense of the busy kitchen going on,
Mhm.
other than I love things that happen through the foreground in imagery where it sometimes obscures a little bit what you want to see, but it makes you look closer,
Mhm.
I think. And so I always enjoy doing that. But central to a scene like that, again, just in relation to the actors, Abigail Breslin had just done Little Miss Sunshine. Is
Mhm.
that right?
Mhm.
And she had actually been nominated for an Academy Award. And in fact, when I cast her, there was a little bit of resistance at Warner Brothers. That it could be maybe, they had other ideas, and I just insist. The movie Little Miss Sundance hadn't even been released at that point, but Abigail she did an audition tape for me that was so deeply authentic in its emotion and feeling that I thought I just had to look no further. Anyway, then she was nominated, and all conversation about it stopped because we were very, very lucky to have her. And she was an absolute gem. Um, a child as a child actor, it's a very demanding, it's a very demanding thing. But she had all the hallmarks of a really genuine actor in her. Um, and I was extremely conscious of that. She was capable of doing almost anything that she was asked to do. And the way she connected with the other actors was quite remarkable. So yes, I think that little scene has got a real charm to it. And it also leads to a moment of connection between Nick and Kate, Erin and Catherine's characters, for the first time, because Kate is very resistant to Nick's charms. But suddenly she sees that, he has a value as a person.
He absolutely does. And yeah, your point about Abigail Breslin, I mean,
Well,
child actors, it can be hit or miss in terms of what actually happens when they go to deliver lines. And Abigail Breslin has such a truth, such an honesty about every performance I've ever seen her in. And as a young actor, it's like you're watching an adult. It's amazing.
it is extraordinary. It is extraordinary. I mean, to that point, I mean, there's a moment early in the film where her mother has died in a car accident, and Kate goes to the hospital to see her, and she hasn't yet been told this terrible news. And the way that scene unfolds and how Abigail uh, uh, manages that as an actor is just incredible. It is a really hugely sophisticated piece of performance. I was really, I really treasured those moments with her, and I knew that, by the way, that they really did cost her something as a person to deliver herself of emotion in that way. So I was very careful to minimize the number of takes I would do with her, because, frankly, first time, best time. It just came. She just knew she had her mind placed in the right environment mentally, and she could deliver herself. But it's done with such powerful emotion and such restraint and tears. It was breathtaking, really, to me. I
Hmm.
thought I was very lucky with all my cast. They were just a superb cast. It was, and that makes it fun as a director. The other
Hmm.
way, it can be hell.
I can only imagine, especially with so much choreography to manage.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So, okay, so that was number 8 for me, and I believe we're up to
Okay.
number 7 for you.
Well, there's a moment which a lot of people have told me over the years was their favorite moment in the film. And it's in the trailer as well. So that was a hallmark on it, I guess. But it's the moment where Kate, very late in the movie, is told that there's this customer who keeps rejecting her rare steaks as being overcooked. And she finally snaps and stabs a steak and marches out into the restaurant. We follow her there as she stabs it in front of the customer, saying, "Is that rare enough for you?" This sort of shaking piece of raw meat stabbed into the tablecloth. And there's the dialogue that follows. And Patty Clarkson, as the restaurant owner, is deeply apologetic and trying to clear up the mess and soothe everybody's things and saying, "I'll get you a new tablecloth." And Catherine says, "Don't worry, I'll do that." And she just rips the tablecloth off the table, leaving everything of the setting in place. And she did her own stunt for that. I mean, it was just fantastic. Again, it was the first time perfect situation. She was very nervous doing it, but boy, she committed to it, and it worked. It was really fun. And then she marches out into the street in Bleecker Street. So it was a location setting of that restaurant. But I guess that's one of, yeah, I just sort of think it's a moment that gets always used to get a great reaction in the audience.
I don't even know how you begin to train for a stunt like that. um, the mess you'd create really when trying to make that happen. But it's amazing, and to know that it was really done, and that Catherine actually did it. And
Well, she was very excited, but this time, everything's still standing on the table. It's quite unreal. It's just, there's just no cloth now.
I think there was it reminds me I don't know if I saw a clip once. There was a scene from like the Mary Tyler Moore show or something like that where Mary Tyler Moore is supposed to
Oh,
do this
right.
really complicated billiards trick and she's supposed to like sink every ball in one shot. And the point was like they were going to get the dialogue and then bring in the stunt person to like the person who actually knew how to do that trick shot, but she got it on the first try. And so her
Wow.
reaction in the actual show is like um, and they kept it because it was perfect, and it feels like there's a quality of that in what Kate was able to do here of
Yeah.
like I'm doing this and everything's gonna stay on this table. Um, I also really like leading into that. Is the actress's name Lily Rabe? Is that the correct pronunciation?
Yes, yes, that's right. Yeah, yeah.
I love the sequence leading up to Kate walking out to the front, where Lily Rabe, it starts off, and this happens in kitchens. It's like table whatever wants to refire, um, and she does that the first time. But now that this character Bernadette has been dealing with this customer up front, she comes back the second time and she's a little angry.
Yeah.
And in a way, it feels like Kate is also going to bat for Bernadette in that situation. It's not it there's something about the camaraderie. Yeah, the customer's always right, but
Yeah,
sometimes
yeah,
they're
yeah,
not.
yeah,
And
yeah.
like that camaraderie that it brings for Bernadette and for Kate in that moment where Kate's like, I'm not standing for this. It's an attack on her cooking, but it's also like
Exactly.
Bernadette shouldn't
Yeah,
have to be dealing with this moment.
yeah.
And I imagine Bernadette felt proud or honored by the big show that Kate put on after that. So I love that moment.
Yeah, no, you get a hint of that element in Kate's character very early in the film when there's a customer who takes issue with her foie gras
Yeah.
and gets a very succinct lesson in how to cook foie gras perfectly. Uh, Meanwhile, uh, the sous chef, the blonde, short-haired
Leia, yeah.
character, yeah, says, foie gras is cruelty to animals. Shut up. Okay. There's all the back and forth, but so you get this, that Kate is a firebrand, that she keeps it sort of under control most of the time. But yeah, that's where she just lets loose. And of course, she's walking out of the restaurant. She's quitting
hmm
and
I mean, you're
going to
about
find.
ready to do anything when you're ready to quit. So
Yeah, yeah,
it's like, I don't care. Um,
yeah.
okay.
I mean,
So
she says that thing. She says, if it was any rarer, if it was any rarer, it'd walk out of here and hail a cab. And minutes later, that's exactly what she's doing. You know.
yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
She's about as rare as it gets right there. Okay. So that's number seven. Let's talk about number
yeah.
six. So I would like to bring in for this one. There's something very real about this dynamic between Kate and Zoe, both in how incredibly uncomfortable it is at first and in how earned it is as they get more comfortable with each other. Um, it's Kate has absolutely no idea what to do with Zoe. And she's about as accepting of the situation as she can be. She's not resistant to it, but she also doesn't know what to do with Zoe. She doesn't have those skills.
Mm.
And Zoe gets that. She's not asking Kate to be something that she isn't. So there's a patience there. And I think there's something very real to me about this is exactly what this could look like. If you're just sort of thrown into this situation and you're just making the best of it and you're getting to know each other and you have to figure out what this looks like. And there's a lot of grace between those two characters as they try to figure out what this dynamic is supposed to be. And, you know, Kate's not her mom, but she's a guardian now. What does that mean? Um, so I think, you know, just that whole dynamic between them and the very real beats there are in that relationship of trying to figure out what normal looks like for them now.
Yes, yeah, yeah. Was it a specific scene with that, or was it just an accumulation of
I think the whole thing. I mean,
how it develops
the
from?
just how it develops. I mean, obviously from the moment Kate's in the hospital watching over Zoe, it's like, well,
Yeah,
this is
yeah.
what's happening now, right? But then everything from trying to get Zoe to eat some food, and then she's not cooking the right things for her, but then she tries with the fish sticks, and Zoe's like, you don't have to try this hard, you know, like this is a lot, you know, like, and
Then she apologizes at one stage. Zoe has sort of flung herself onto her bed amidst all her stuffed animals, and Kate comes in and says, "Look, I know I'm doing everything wrong, and I'm just this, I'm just, you know." And they come to an agreement about granting Zoe a wish, and then Kate goes to leave, and Zoe says, "Oh, Kate," and she turns, and Zoe says, "You're not doing everything wrong."
it's so beautiful. I mean, it's
You
so earned
know,
as we go along because we have these moments that are much more serious, like what you just mentioned. And then there are some like, I can't find my scarf.
yes,
It's
right,
like, you
right,
don't
right,
need your
right.
scarf. And then Zoe's like, I need my scarf. You know, she gives her one
Not
look and it's
not
like,
that
get me my
not that
scarf.
scarf. It's a
Yeah.
really particular scarf, you know.
Yeah.
So it's the first lesson for Kate, which is like you can't pass off anything on this kid.
Yeah.
She'll
Like
get what she wants if
she
you
knows
just
what the scarf is she needs, you know? Like,
right.
don't you even try it. And she can't leave without it. All right. Don't even try
No.
that.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, it's you know, we alternate between sort of low stakes and high stakes situations, but the whole way through, I feel that I think the word lesson that you just used was really good there. They're both having to sort of learn each other in a way
Mm-hmm.
that Nick and Zoe do not need to do.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. That just happens, doesn't it? It's sort of it just meshes with yeah.
yeah. But
So
yeah, so that's number
and there's
6.
well, it's a nice segue really into probably like my number five, which is the arrival of the babysitter. Uh, Kate has booked a babysitter through an agency, a babysitter called Charlotte, and she opens the door, and this was actually Zoe Kravitz's debut as an actor. It was her first role in which she was cast in a major film, and so anyway, Kate opens the door, and of course, there's this goth kind of creature with piercings and art and makeup and sort of, you know, just. And she says, "Are you Charlotte?" She said, "Yeah." From the agency, she said, "You expecting another Charlotte?" You know, like it's just attitude. And of course, there Kate is going to have to leave her with Zoe for the evening while she goes on the night, the evening sort of shift at the restaurant. Um, but Zoe was fantastic. You know, she was thrilled to be cast. Um, she actually devised her own costume because when she saw what had been created for her by the costume department, she said, "No, that's not right. This character was me 2 years ago, and I've got the gear." And she just so she did that and sort of how her makeup was to be, and so she was very, very sort of self-determined. Um, because she was a minor at the time, her father, Lenny Kravitz, had to come and sit on the set at this, you know, during when she was shooting, which was very interesting, obviously, to have such an extraordinary sort of celebrity musician there. People found a lot of reason to come over to my monitors while Lenny was there. But and Zoe was fantastic, and what a career she'd gone on to, you know, with the Batman and in fact directing a movie herself last year. But I was very pleased that I spotted her first and gave her first gig.
That's something to say for sure. She's really done some interesting projects since.
Oh yeah, she's very
TV as well, I believe.
yeah, yeah.
I
No,
think was she in
she
Big
was
Little
really
Lies, I think.
yes, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
I
Yeah,
have
this
my
is
casting director, Ronna Cress, to thank for, you know, for always putting forward these fantastic sort of choices for me with cast. She knows I want the real thing. I want really good, strong actors, but who are also going to appeal to an audience. So she's extremely important in the scheme of things.
Mm. Well, let's go back to a sort of a big picture theme here. So number four, I wanted to mention that this movie captures grief so beautifully on camera. Um,
Mm.
and this is certainly a bit about the script itself, but also the camera choices. I think when Kate first she's found out about her sister's accident, her sister has passed away. She's gone to the hospital to see Zoe. She goes back to the restaurant, and it's too early. It's way too early.
Mm.
And she's the all the choices there, this sort of like subtle slow motion feel, like she's
Yeah.
almost moving underwater, like the choice of when voiceover is used, um makes it feel so detached. She's very
Right.
detached from herself, and I think it can really feel like that, can't it? Like I think sometimes sometimes we see film and TV try to capture what something feels like when you're the
Mm.
audience member. What does that feel like to you? And I think this got there for me.
Oh,
There's stages of grief that they go through. Um, we see a lot of those depicted. I mean, something like later when Kate and Zoe are watching the home video together,
oh, yeah.
that's certainly a more cinematic visual depiction of it. But this was like getting inside, and I really appreciated that the dazed look that Catherine has on her face as Kate. Yeah, it captured something that looks very familiar, and I imagine it resonates for a lot of people to see it shown that way.
Well, that's great. That's great to hear, because I feel um, it was interesting even just revisiting the movie and remembering the things that are important to me um, really do revolve around the action. I mean, what people are doing. The dialogue is really its own thing. You can always change it. You can always change the words people are saying. But the uh, to 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 hold the audience inside a thought, someone's thought process. I mean, it does require very good actors to do that, um, but also for them to understand that that is wanted from them. That it isn't just all about snap, crackle, pop dialogue and let's have a laugh and on to the next scene. I mean, this technically. I mean, rom-com is an interesting thing because in my mind it was a rom-dram
Hmm. Hmm.
because grief was at the heart of it, the loss of a mother and a sister, um, but also that it becomes about what is a family. A family is not something you're just born with. Family is something you construct. And by the end of the movie, when they have the scene in the little bistro that they do, which is Kate and Nick and Zoe's, is the name of the bistro, but that's their family, and that to me was really important, sort of not message, but uh, an important element of the story was that construction of family. Um, Sorry, that was a bit of a rave, but
Oh no, I think it's beautifully said. I mean, and
um,
that's why it certainly is a bigger theme of that point. When I was curating a list for Rom-Com Month, there were some rom drama comedies. Like I don't know what the perfect term is for some of these films, but there were definitely some films here that were more dramatic, and um, I I felt they should get as much love as ones that were more traditional
yeah,
rom-coms.
yeah,
And I also like things that are a little more complex. So I think this is one of the ones. There are definitely funny moments, absolutely, in this
yeah.
movie, a lot of them. But it's also comes through grief. Actually, there's another film on this list, Catch and Release, that came out around the same time,
Okay.
within a couple of years. That's also a through grief. It starts off with a death, and then it's the aftermath and the characters dealing with it. And I think early 2000s, we had some really good movies that sort of dealt with this and dealt with the complex, sort of defying genre plot lines.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, but
Mm.
number four, the way the movie captures grief, where did you want to go with number three?
Um, well, there's, oh, one, yeah, one thing I wanted to talk about actually just touching on that end scene in the bistro that they've they've set up together. Um, it was an interesting thing for me as a director because um, as we approached the end of shooting, and we had actually shot that scene in an entirely other location, um, and I'd never felt really happy with it. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but I think it was just my choice of location where we shot the scene originally was wrong. I just had made the wrong choice. It was big and cavernous and felt detached, and it was hard. The characters just sort of disappeared in it. Um, but you live with it. You just think, oh God, well, I made a mistake there, but let's just move on. But at the end of towards the end of the schedule, um, Castle Rock and the producers working with my wife Kerry, who was the producer of the film, um, said, "Look, we're coming in way under budget. We've got $1 million we haven't spent. Is there anything that you would like to do? Anything else, or anything you want to do again?" And I thought, okay, I said, what about the ending? I'd love to. Could we reshoot the ending? And they said, absolutely. And of course, I'd never had that in my early film career in Australia. You don't even dream of that sort of thing. So I got a second chance at it, and it was fantastic because we found a beautiful little, authentic little cafe in the village, um, something that felt intimate and right for the characters, and just made the film end on the note of warmth that it really needed, that it had lost in this other location. So, I'm just really thankful to the vision of the studio to understand that there was something I could do to improve the film. And I think it was a huge benefit. And but quite unique in my experience, being told you're coming in way under, but you haven't spent enough. What do you want to spend it on now? Wasn't quite put like that, but you know what I mean. It gave me the opportunity to really get a scene right that I felt was a misfire in the film, and it was being the ending. It was very, very important, and it was a big deal. You have to get these stars back together. They're all on other projects now. This is months later. It's during the editing, in fact, and but they stood behind me and said, yes, do it. It's worth it. The film is great. So that was a lovely thing.
That's so interesting to get the backstory on this. I mean, I think the final result is perfect. We definitely feel the intimacy of that space. Um, and it's a
Yes, and they
corner
down they
building, right? It's a corner
yes,
lot, is that right?
yes,
Yeah, I
yes.
mean it feels like they're in a small space with their family, but they can see the whole world. It's this lovely, yeah, what a
It
great
also
fit.
almost has a slightly European feel to it in the sense of being in the village in downtown New York. I mean, um, it just had a different ambience about a life going on. And in fact, we had a number of friends that we had who got sort of stacked into being extras in the film, and people with French bulldogs, which were a very new big thing then. Now everyone's got one, but I mean, there were all sorts of little touches that felt very personal, um, from our point of view as the filmmakers, for me and my wife Kerry. So, but it was yeah, it was lovely to be able to end on that note.
I'm so glad that we got to see the version you wanted us to see. It
Yeah,
reads correctly to the
but it was
audience.
I'd had quite a strenuous conversation with the studio at the outset of making the film about making it in New York. They said, no, we always do these films in Toronto. It's too expensive doing it in New York. You have to go and do it in Toronto. And Kerry, as the producer, really challenged them, and she drew up all the figures that applied to shooting in Sydney, Australia, Toronto, New York. And honestly, you could do it in New York. It is more difficult because the streets are under such pressure from film production that they have to leave them kind of lying fallow. If a street's been used in a film, it can't be used for a certain period of time, some months or maybe even a year. And there's just a set of streets that everybody wants to use. But anyway, I promised the studio that the New York would be, downtown New York would be a character in the film. And I think I delivered on that because you get wonderful glimpses, the Brooklyn Bridge with a fish market underneath it, and the downtown skyline. There was it was and getting those things right, getting the street life right in a film, even in those incidental scenes, Kate taking Zoe to school, those scenes can throw an audience out of a movie if they look staged, if they look like those are actors, they're extras. So it's quite a bit of work as a director to massage these scenes into a way that feels like a slice of actual life that's happening. Even though it seems like a very little connecting scene, it's crucial because it keeps the audience in the movie, in the characters. And I love the fact we were shooting in the winter light of New York. It was so beautiful, so cold and so crisp, and just gorgeous, clear, clean light. Anyway,
Mm.
directorial rave. But
Oh,
you can edit any
this is
way you like.
I can't get enough of this. This is so great. For number two, I want to go back to something we did touch upon before, but I wanted to mention a specific scene with Abigail Breslin. Um, Zoe, so Zoe and Kate have had this conversation in the park. It's gone wrong. Zoe has run across traffic.
Yes.
Terrifying. Kate is terrified running after her. Um, and she catches up with Zoe. And Abigail Breslin says, "Let me go. I want my mom." And my
Mm-hmm.
heart breaks into a million pieces looking at Abigail
Yeah.
Breslin's face as Zoe. I mean, wow. The this feels like it really happened. Like she
Yeah.
was so in it. Uh, Abigail is great for the whole movie, but the delivery of that, the just like the just she's just distraught. And Catherine as Kate running across the street and the increasing panic in her voice.
Yes. Yeah.
Like I am just all the way in that scene. And
Mm.
it's certainly and it can't even be a fight. Like
Mm, mm,
Kate
mm.
Kate can't say you can't run across the street like that. Don't run away from me. Like this is bad. This is like this little girl's heart is broken. She doesn't know what to do. Kate doesn't know how to help. It's just like like you just let this moment breathe, and understand that this kid needs to work some things out. But it's all over their faces. And my goodness, I don't know how many times you all need to do this on on the other end, but this is a lot, this scene.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, I do. I try to do well. I don't do a lot of takes of things, and most especially when they are of high emotion, because as I said before, I think it's costly on people who really dig into themselves to deliver that to you, that you just can't do it over and over again and expect not to have a price to pay for that. And so I was highly conscious of that, especially with Abigail, but with any actor, I would think carefully, because so often the early takes are really the ones that work. And but I have to say, I mean, Catherine threw herself into this role with an enormous commitment. Um, she sometimes doesn't, in those days, especially, she didn't always get the best press. People like to pick an angle about someone and that becomes who they are. And she was so far from being any kind of a diva, or she was such a hard-working actress, often the first to arrive and the last to leave in a given day. Um, she had such an ethic of work that she'd learned from her family as, a kid in Wales. And uh, it was something where I just really admired her commitment to it. She did some extraordinary things in pre-production. She said, I want to work as a waitress in a restaurant. I said, oh my gosh, well, okay. We'd been in this particular restaurant called Fiamma downtown. And I said, well, maybe Fiamma would let you do that, And she went and did that. And she honestly was just, would go up and wait on tables. And of course, some people would say, people say to you, you look uncannily like Catherine Zeta-Jones. And she said, oh, don't say that. The boss hates it. He's going to fire me if anyone says that now. Or some people thought it was like, okay, well, where's the hidden camera? Like they were being, there was a goof thing happening. But she would just wanted to learn what it was like to be on the other side of that membrane as a customer in a restaurant as opposed to a staff member. And she did it with full commitment. I did not expect that.
Yeah, that's amazing to know that it's interesting to then think about her filmography, knowing that she throws herself into the prep that much. Um,
Yeah.
it's
I think it was a very important film for her actually, because she was the tentpole, that's the whole thing was structured around her. And she opened the movie, the movie opened, it played, it was successful. Um, and it proved that she, as a star, could open a movie. And
hmm,
I think it was a wonderful thing. And it was lovely to be able to collaborate with her on that adventure.
hmm. Well, okay, so
Oh,
we're up to number one.
oh
And of
man.
all the things that you could pick, what do you want to say for number one?
Well, I've saved something which is kind of a personal thing, really, rather than a really big moment. It's a very small moment in the film. But Patricia Clarkson, as the restaurant owner, they're having the staff meal, which is the tradition that they always have before the service. And she's deliberating on a wine and saying, "Now this is a very nice little dolcetto. Where would you think it's from?" And one of the waiters goes, "Oh, probably Piedmonte." And she says, "No, it's from South Australia, the Adelaide Hills. It's actually from my vineyard." And my wife Kerry had said, "Why don't we put our wine on the table there? What's this Italian wine doing there? Just put our Dolcetto on the table." So it was just a little in joke for us. And a later scene too, when Nick and Kate are having an evening together after the restaurant's closed and they're in the kitchen sharing a glass of wine. That's another one of our wines.
This wine brought to you by Scott Hicks. This is so good. I love
Now
this
a major
detail.
wine. We
Yeah,
should have had
well,
No Reservations. The
yeah,
title of the film is an interesting thing, actually, if we have time to talk about that.
we do. Yeah. Tell me
Yeah,
about
yeah.
that.
Well, it was for a long, long time, it was the untitled Scott Hicks project, which of course made a mockery of all the early promotional materials that they created, because I have things like, wheelie bags and things like that with the untitled Scott Hicks project, which is not very good publicity because nobody knows what it's for. Anyway, it was really difficult to find a title that sort of fit. The original film, that it was a remake of this German film, was called Mostly Martha, and nobody was very keen on that. And then when it came to making something about a New York restaurant, I mean, at that time, there were more than 20,000 food-related businesses in Manhattan alone. So every name you could imagine had gone, 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 gone. There's nothing. Oh, no, that's gone. And in the end, they picked a name that had also gone, because No Reservations was the title of a series by Anthony Bourdain, the celebrity chef. And ultimately, the studio had to pay for the rights to use the name No Reservations. But it was just a struggle to find something, let alone the name of the restaurant. We ended up calling it 22 Bleecker because it was in Bleecker Street, and number 22 was a church, and we figured they wouldn't sue. But of course, Warner Brothers got it cleared anyway, because they clear absolutely everything. But 22 Bleecker was, you couldn't call it salt, you couldn't call it this, and every name was taken you imagined. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was interesting, but more interesting for us probably than for the audience.
That's probably gotten even harder in the decades
Oh,
since.
yes,
Now
absolutely.
that you're saying that for a 2007 film, especially with, reality cooking shows taking
Yes, yeah.
off,
Well,
that
what
probably,
a better title would have been My Kitchen Rules. If we'd been prescient enough, because that didn't exist at the time.
hmm.
My Kitchen Rules, was Kate absolutely to a T.
Yeah.
Uh, and so anyway,
Oh, it's
yeah, it
so
was
interesting. Yeah. The legal part of it all, getting everything
everything,
cleared is probably.
especially Warner Brothers, are extremely, they're punctilious about every detail. Anything that appears on the screen, you have to have clearance for using it. So it's quite a thing.
Hmm. Oh
Takes
my
a lot of
goodness. This has been so fascinating. I mean, just to be able to talk with you, who knows all the details of this, is just a
it's been
dream.
fun.
But I've loved this conversation, and here, Scott and I have shared our 10 favorite things about this film. And the question, everybody, is, what do you love about this movie? It could be things we talked about, could be things we didn't, but feel free to add into the comments things that you enjoyed about the movie No Reservations, or still enjoy to this day when you rewatch it. And, um, before I cut back over to the conversation with Leanne Wong, I wanted to give you, Scott, a chance to. I know it's been an incredibly strange time in your industry, but is there anything that you wanted to plug or anything you have coming up that you want us to know about?
Well, I just know I made last year. I made two documentary features. One of which was called "The Musical Mind," which was actually a revisiting of David Helfgott, who was the subject of my movie Shine. David has been a friend of mine for 40 years, and it was revisiting him and about the impact of the movie Shine on his life and his career, and with several other musicians who were also involved with Shine. Daniel Johns, who was a superstar from an Australian band called Silverchair, which was very famous as well in America. Um, and Simon Tedeschi, who was a child prodigy whose hands stood in for David Elfcott. Anyway, this film has had a considerable success here in Australia, being nominated as best film in the recent awards and winning best cinematography. So I've really enjoyed that because I do make documentaries alongside feature films that I do. When I was making No Reservations, Philip Glass was doing the score for me, and I was making a documentary about him at the same time. So a documentary is a very important strand of my work. And this recent one is in The Musical Mind has enjoyed some success.
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you for sharing that. For those who haven't seen these projects, this is a great time to go
Yeah.
out and check them out. And now, in just a moment, I'm going to cut over to the conversation with Leanne Wong, but I'll be back with Scott in just a moment as we close out this conversation. Okay, everybody, I am here with Leanne Wong, who was the culinary consultant or one of the culinary consultants on the movie No Reservations. Welcome, Leanne.
Aloha, how are you?
So good. First of all, I know we want to talk about things that you loved about this film, but let's put some context to this. What was your
Mhm.
involvement with this film? What was your role at the time? Tell us a little bit about that story.
I believe at the time I was working as the executive chef of events and continuing education at the now shuttered French Culinary Institute in New York City. And I was hired as a culinary consultant. And so I worked with the production team on both developing food styling for a lot of the on-camera dishes, as well as training some of the actors and background actors for the movie, for the film.
Wow. Okay, so it's pretty involved. You had a lot of different plates to spin, if you will. That might be a weird
Hmm.
phrase to bring in here, but like you were working with a lot of people
Yes.
to make this happen. Okay. So I'm excited to talk with you about, like, I've already shared my list of favorite things about this film, but I'm interested as somebody who worked so closely on this film in such a very specific way. What are some of the things that you loved about this movie? So let's start with the first thing that would be on your list.
I mean, the movie, the subject matter of the movie, I think is really obviously hits home for many female chefs. It is a remake of a German film called Mostly Martha, and it centers around basically a female chef, a chef owner of a restaurant whose sister basically perishes in a car accident, and she has to suddenly take in her niece. And so that's, those are human dramas. That's human story. And the fact that, here you have this professional woman who knows how to be in charge of dozens of adults, but doesn't know how to be in charge of a small child, a young girl. That is inherently the drama. And along the way, she meets a handsome new young sous chef who opens her eyes to more than just work in the world.
Yeah, I love the summary of it, and I think you raise a really good point. Like the Kate, who's at the center of this film, has a really good handle on how to work with people in her world. But even from a social standpoint, she doesn't really know what to do with adults. So,
Hmm.
when you get into this situation where she now has to be in an entirely social situation and with a kid, it's like all these different elements that don't make sense in her brain. And she doesn't have the skills for it. Never really thought she needed to have the skills for it. And it's a real test.
Yeah, I have a young son, and I tell you, it's every day's learning.
Yeah.
So,
And she didn't sign on for that, but neither neither did the child. So it's
uh,
like such a, like they're making the best they can out of a
yeah.
really bad situation. And I think there's a spirit of sort of I don't know, togetherness, but like we're
Eh,
doing what we can. There's a
yeah.
scrappiness in this film.
I mean, I think it's about, the film is about resilience for both the child and the adult. It's about finding family and finding love. And it's about growth. I mean, that's all human story, and in a sexy little package with like Catherine Zeta-Jones and Aaron Eckhart,
And
so.
food, my
And
goodness.
food. People love food. It's a white tablecloth setting is always a good backdrop for story.
It is. And I'm interested, if there are things on your list in terms of like, the role that you had, because the way that the kitchen and the way that food is presented to us in this film feels a little different than it does in some other films and TV shows that I've
Hmm.
seen. It's a little bit more, a word that I'm going to use today is fantasy. Like there's a really like peaceful, fantastic, beautiful element. And I think a lot of times TVs and movies set in kitchens are stressful, like super stressful. Um,
Yeah,
and
depends on what kitchen you're working in.
yeah, yeah. Um, so yeah, I'm curious, like, what it was like, working on this and what some of the other things on your list are.
I think Scott Hicks would prefer to call it cinematic kitchen. It reads really well. I mean, essentially the story is that Kate works at a like I think like four-star restaurant or Michelin starred restaurant or something like that. And I think we shot in Tribeca, so it was like in this beautiful space. It had like all like exposed brick and white tablecloth and candlelight. So it was really quintessential sort of New York and very romantic. That was the feeling. And yeah, that was such a great backdrop. And I think for me, when was this film shot? Do you know the year?
Shot, I'm not sure, but it came out in 2007.
2007. Okay, so we probably did this around late 2005 or early 2006. So at the time, I had just signed on to do Top Chef. And so I had appeared in the first season of Top Chef, and then they had invited me to become the culinary producer for the series. And so I became the culinary producer for Top Chef at that time. So getting involved in this sort of behind the scenes production work and being able to work on a major motion picture was very exciting. And what's interesting was just being able to work with some of the actors. And I got to work with a very young Abigail Breslin, who is so talented. And it's just been amazing to follow her career over the years. And my friend Jenny Wade, who I call her, we became friends after this, and it was just like I always make fun of her and her fake baby. She had the fake baby bump as a sous chef. Which interestingly enough, when I was pregnant and working, all those things kind of reminded me of that moment when I was like training Jenny on how to like use a knife while she had this like fake baby bump. But yeah, it's those were some fun moments. I mean, I just think to kind of see behind the scenes production and how things work, and then Scott and his team were saying, telling me what they needed and what they needed the background actors be doing. So we worked on things like knife skills, how to saute, plating skills, et cetera, et cetera. So it was a lot of fun.
So things were scripted, and then they were saying to you, can you transfer these skills to the people who need to
Yeah,
execute
yeah,
them?
pretty much, it's like you kind of want the whatever's happening in the background to look as real as possible. And so they actually hired trained cooks to be the actors in the background actors. So they hired people who had knife skills and were very comfortable in a kitchen setting, and it wasn't just
Yeah. Yeah. And then so with those folks, because I believe you had some involvement with them as well,
acting.
was sort of the differentiation of how you were working with the people who were used to the knife skills and who were used to the restaurant environment? And then what are some of the ways that it was different for you to work with Abigail and Jenny?
Well, I didn't, basically I told the trained cooks, I was like, don't cut yourself. You guys know what you're doing. Work neat. Don't cut yourself. Like you're on camera. Don't look at the camera. Focus on what you're doing on your cutting board or what you're doing at the stove. And basically that was all direction from Scott. And then working with Abigail and Jenny was fun because Jenny full on had to be a sous chef. So she had to learn the language, she had to learn the sort of motions, and she had to be believable as a sous chef. And so what was I remember she came in, she had this beautiful, beautiful long blonde hair, and they made her cut her hair for the movie. I
Oh
think
no.
they cut it, or it was either that or she had a wig on. Either way, she ended up with really, really short hair, as for functionality and kind of to sell that role as like mom to be and like sous chef, running a restaurant. And Abigail was fun. Abigail was, I think, she was like 8 or 9 years old at the time. And we decided on things that she could do on camera that would be easy. So things like peeling carrots and then learning how to flip pancakes. I believe she has a scene where she's flipping pancakes with Aaron Eckhart.
I was
So,
gonna ask about that.
yeah, so
I
that
don't have
was
that
that
skill.
was that was a lot of fun. And it was just it's always fun working with kids and to see and her brother Spencer are so lovely. And as child actors, they took an interest in food and cooking. So that was fun. It was just like teaching a kid how to cook.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I was gonna ask about the pancake flipping scene because she did that well.
Yeah,
I
no,
don't know how
she's a
many
pro.
takes it takes, but
She's a pro.
yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, when you think back on all these different people that you worked with and your role on the show, are there any other favorite moments that come to mind for you?
I mean, it was just fun to be able to develop the food styling and then to, be able to visit set a day or two and like see those dishes that I developed like on the plate, working with their props artist, and their on-set food stylist, to really see that on camera and then watching the movie and seeing like those dishes on camera and again, I'm not sure. I think at the time it was like everything was just supposed to be colorful and really visual, you know? So I think we had like scallops and we did, there was like a vegetable terrine, there's some other dishes. But it was amazing to walk onto a movie set, you know? And that was like, I think I had just started experiencing like behind the scenes production and being on like television and movie sets. And it was a very, very cool experience in that, right?
And then when you say styling, what does
hmm
that mean for you?
Well, food styling is just, you know, again, you're making things for on-camera appearance. So it's not, food stylists will tell you it's not always edible. A lot of things are just plated for visual. But you know, and that was very, I mean, shoots, that was like 20 years ago. That was so much, I've developed so much as a chef, and I think my cooking sensibilities would sort of the knowledge that I've accumulated over 20 years would only improve the job that I would do. You know what I mean? So I would say that I was very green in the field back then. So now I have you know 20 plus years under my belt of TV production and cooking and chefing and yeah, it's amazing to think about all those experiences and earlier on in my career, which was so long ago,
When
2006, 2005.
Yeah, when you think about like the styling for this movie, because obviously there's a specific menu that's to
hmm
some degree in the script.
Sure.
Like we're hearing a lot about quail, we're hearing a lot about like there's
Yep.
certain things that are being spoken aloud.
hmm
So when you were doing the food styling, how much of this was you working with a list of things that you knew had to be shown versus how much of this was your input? How much latitude did you
It
have?
was basically they gave me a script and said these are the dishes we need to create for camera.
Okay.
So we did the dish development and like sort of like the dish development at French Culinary Institute in my amphitheater at the time. And basically, I gave them some different plating options. They picked out stylings that they want, you know, and we went over it with their prop artist. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And then they made endless amounts of what I call stunt food. You know, they had stunt food standing by for every take, which was cool.
Oh, that's neat. Yeah, I
Yeah.
like that. So anything else jump out to you as a favorite experience on this show or favorite thing that you saw in the movie that reflected what it's really like for you?
I mean, I think it's just it's a really sweet film. It's a nice little neat package. You know, I think that it kind of fulfills those sort of like romantic fantasies when you're like, "Oh, I want somebody to blindfold me and feed me stuff." It's never that good. So I was like, I'm trying to think if my husband were to blindfold me, what he would actually try feeding me.
It's like what you imagine, what you get. It's one of those split screen
Yeah.
type of things.
It definitely wouldn't be like bechamel or Mornay sauce. Just like, what is this? Is this leftover soup? Yeah, no, it's just it was just a very, very cool experience to be able to contribute to essentially a piece of artwork, somebody's vision, and the telling of a story. You know, I think that that has been over the years, I've dabbled in sort of like fictional TV and film, whether it's been contributing as a culinary producer or being on screen. And it's, you know, that was one of the first experiences that I had, I think, in my early career. And it's so funny because like I don't think about it, you know, and occasionally someone would be like, I watched that movie and I saw your name in the credits. And I'm like, you read the credits? So, so it, you know, I'm proud of that work back then. And you know, it has the story itself is still still applies today. You know, there's so many working single moms out there that are just crushing it, you know, and so this is, I think, a very empowering story about finding yourself as an older woman.
Yeah, and not having any notice, like to know that you can adapt and be resilient and
Yeah.
whatever situation life throws at you. And she didn't have 9 months to plan for this. She didn't have any months to
Nope.
plan for this. It was just figure it out. And everybody does in this movie.
Yeah.
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 Well, is there anything else that you wanted to mention before we sort of close it? Anything else that jumps out to you as you wish people would know this about the experience?
I mean, it's just enjoy the film, you know? It's like that's really it. Go out, support your local restaurants, support female-owned businesses. I'm here in Hawaii. If you guys ever want to come see me, my restaurant Coco Head Cafe is here in Honolulu, Hawaii. I also have one in Tokyo and Osaka. So, the idea that we can have it all, and it takes a lot of hard work, a lot of emotion, a lot of fortitude, a lot of resilience, but we can have our dreams. We got to work hard for them.
Well, thank you so much for sharing some of the things that you love about this movie and more about your experience. And, I can't thank you enough for taking some time.
Awesome. Cheers.
Cheers. Okay, everybody, that was the conversation with Leanne Wong, and I'm back here with Scott Hicks, and we both just want to thank you for watching this whole discussion of the movie No Reservations. For those who are interested in Rom-Com Month and want to see what's coming up next, tomorrow is going to be day 18. We're going to talk about the movie Center Stage from 2000, a dance movie, a ballet movie. If you know me, you know I'm going to love that. So this is with Amanda Schull, Ethan Stiefel, Zoe Saldana, Sasha Radetsky. And actually, for that one, I am covering that with my very special guest, Barry Wetcher, who was the still photographer for Center Stage. So he was on set the whole time and he's shared some great things from behind the scenes for that as well. So I'm looking forward to covering that one and hope you'll all join me for that. In the meantime, happy Rom-Com Month, everybody. Get love, get donuts. Bye.